Everyone knows what to expect from the classic college undergrad experience, but what people don't talk about as much is exactly how it stacks up to the honest journey through medical school. If you want to know how medical school compares category by category to college before applying or attending, at the end of this video, you'll be able to make a decision on the best fit for you. In this video, I'm going to break it down into 5 categories and give you my take on each of them. The overall winner goes to, I'm currently an M2 student at a US medical school with years of experience learning from both of these environments, and along the way, I've mentored many others that have made this transition as well. So to go ahead and kick things off, I'm going to start with the first category, which is the content of what you learned. So a statement that I heard all the time but didn't really resonate with me as well until I got to medical school was that school gets harder but more relevant as time goes by. So to start with the pre-med side of things, obviously you have your prerequisite courses, your basic sciences, and you'll have a lot of other requirements that you'll need to meet in order to graduate. Oftentimes these will be classes that you're not necessarily interested in, but a lot of times this can be a good thing because you'll find interests or passions that you didn't know you would otherwise have by taking those classes that are required of you. From my personal experience in undergrad, I did enjoy some of the classes that I was taking that were required, but since I knew I wanted to do something in the medical field for most of my college experience, any classes that were outside of medicine or things that were relevant to the basic sciences felt like they were kind of a little bit of a waste of my time. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy learning some of those things in my free time, and I probably would otherwise, but there's just a key difference, as y'all know, if there's a professor that's grading you and you need an A on a subject versus if you can just passively look things up or read books or search them on the internet that interest you in your own time. I remember having to take classes on things like sociology, communications, history, percussion, art appreciation. These were all things that were kind of fun, but for the most part, I just felt like they were very irrelevant. Overall, I'd say that the classroom experience was pretty good in undergrad, but for the most part, it could use some improvement. Now let's counterbalance that with the curriculum in medical school, which if you don't know already, every single person in your medical school class will take the exact same classes and curriculum throughout the entire time. So this is very similar to a close-knit high school cohort where you and a lot of your friends would take the same classes. Now, I think a lot of people assume that you're only studying medicine in med school, and that for the most part is true, but there are a lot of basic sciences baked into this. In fact, we spent the first few weeks of medical school purely reviewing biochemistry, cellular biology, genetics, things that lay the foundation for what you're gonna learn afterwards, and generally these actually don't go away because they are gonna be on your first board exam, and they can even show up well beyond that. A key distinction I wanna make here though is that even though these are basic science things, they are clinically relevant and they could potentially sometimes be life-saving, especially in those rare diseases, and they're going to have an application to things you do on an everyday basis in whatever job you go into in the medical field in the future, and for that reason they're a lot more interesting to learn. Like most people out there, I'm sure y'all can resonate, I don't really retain information. I can learn it, but I don't retain it if I don't feel like it's going to be applicable to the things that I'm doing in the future. And especially with the amount of information that we get in our pre-clerkship curriculum in medical school, there is simply no way that I would retain even a portion of the information that I have in my brain right now if I didn't feel like it was going to be applicable to something I was going to do in a clinical or hospital setting. And I know I already touched on this, but this information is quite literally applicable to myself, the people in my family that have health conditions, the people I work with in the clinic that I volunteer at. It's literally the reasons why people die or get sick. Needless to say, the content that I learn actually sticks in my brain and it doesn't waste the time that I put in to learn it. And so for that reason, the winner of the first category is medical school. And that brings us to category number 2, which is the learning style and the timing of learning. Now, this is 2 subcategories, so I'm going to break them up and talk about them one by one. So starting with learning style on the pre-med side of things, you're going to have a professor that teaches you things in class. Now, I know some professors will do a flipped classroom and some professors won't teach you that much, but for the most part, you're learning things for the first time in a classroom setting, and then afterwards, whenever you choose to study, and that's going to depend on whether you scheduled your classes for the morning or afternoon. But for me personally, I studied in the evening and at night. When you finally do go back over that information, let's say you took notes in class or you just kind of sat and paid attention, you're resynthesizing that information or learning it in a new way so that you can consolidate it, and that's what the majority of your studying time is for. Now, I would not consider this self-learning because it's not your first pass through the content. Now, I know a lot of you, like me, would be saying, well, I had to self-study all of OChem. My professor didn't teach me anything. And to that, I would say, yeah, I agree. Or insert any other class like biochemistry, whatever professor you had that didn't teach you much and you felt like you had to learn a lot. So that can be true, but by and large, I'm gonna consider pre-med a time when you learn things in the classroom and then you re-synthesize the information afterwards. Now in medical school, at least where I am, our lectures are almost completely optional outside of our skill activities, and self-learning is the golden standard for everything. Sure, we have professors that go over material on a Monday to Friday basis, but from the vast majority of people that I've talked to and my classmates, I can clearly see that only a small portion of our class actually goes to these lectures, and most people are either watching those online at 2x speed or they're completely self-learning from third-party resources. So from my personal experience, and again, this can sound kind of crazy, the vast majority of almost everything I've learned in the past year, I've actually seen that information for the very first time on a flashcard that I got online or from an online resource. Think something like Khan Academy, but for medical school, and obviously it's taught by doctors. In my experience and my classmates' experience, the professors can oftentimes go into way too much detail or talk a little bit too slow, and if you're online, it just standardizes everything. You'll have the exact information that you need for the board exam, and you can do it in your own time, at your own pace, and speed things up or slow things down however you need it. The lecturers who teach our classes are usually hyper specialized in on that subject. Think a PhD that spent most of their time talking about the one little lecture that they're giving, or a doctor that subspecialized in the exact subject they're teaching. So when you bring them in and let them lecture the classroom, it's almost like bringing a kid to a candy shop, because there's just no way they want to give you only information you need for your board exam. They can talk about this for hours on end, so they will fill up that entire lecture with all the details that they can pack into it. Now, I will say this is actually really fun if there's a particular subject that you're interested in or a specialty that you like a lot. For me, I'll personally mark my calendar when those professors are teaching to try to go take notes and get as much information as possible. At the end of the day though, because this online learning content is very standardized, it does take the luck out of it of getting a good professor. Like sometimes when you're an undergrad and you have to look at Rate My Professor or just kind of roll the dice on getting a class professor that you're not really sure about. So the second subcategory here is timing, and we'll start with pre-med, which is divided into semesters, and then you have a summer and winter break for the most part. Now I do have a friend in California, they have a like 3-semester system, so this will vary from where you are, but for the most part, you're gonna have distinct semester blocks, and then you're gonna have big breaks in between. Now, something I will say about those big breaks is that in undergrad, yes, you do have the ability to volunteer or do research or build your application, but really if you wanna take a break and you don't wanna feel terrible about yourself, you can do that. You can still spend time with family, you can relax, and yes, you can do this in medical school, but it's a little bit different for a key distinction I'll make in just a second. And then for me personally, zooming in on a week-to-week basis, I would have most of my classes from Monday to Friday. Again, some of those lectures would be like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, some would be Tuesday, Thursday. All of you watching this probably already know this, but the point is that I would have my lectures in the morning or afternoon, and then I would spend my time in the evening and night, mostly on weekdays unless there was a big exam coming up or an exam that was on a Monday, and then on the weekends I would be able to relax a little bit more. Looking back on it, it was honestly such a good time. Like that schedule, almost unbeatable. So directly comparing that to medical school though, on the medical school side of things, we do not have any semesters at all. We go year round and we'll have small breaks scattered throughout, but for the most part, we're just always on a go basis. So from week to week, every single week we will have a quiz or an exam. And then at the end of a certain block of weeks, usually every 5 to 10 weeks, we'll have a big module exam. For my winter break, I had 2 weeks off, and for my summer break, I had 2 weeks off. And you can expect, at least for my medical school, again, this is what I can speak to, we had a week or two kind of scattered throughout the year that would also be distributed for small breaks. The other thing that's important to mention is that in some places across your 4 years of medical school, you will have larger gaps where you have several weeks at a time that are off, but these are actually not off times because you're using these blocks as dedicated board exam studying for step 1, step 2, or step 3, or at some schools I know they have dedicated research blocks where you're trying to grind out as much research as possible so that you can build up your application to apply to residency. Now for those reasons, obviously I'm not going to consider those as breaks, but I will say it's not like we're always working. We will have a few days scattered throughout the year where we can take off, and you can always take a weekend off or do whatever you need. From some of the other people I've talked to at medical schools, they can have exams every other week or just mainly big summative module exams. Now this is pretty freaking obvious from what I'm talking about right now, but this can obviously contribute to burnout or feeling like you can't relax at all, because even when you do have time off from your curriculum work, you feel like you need to be prepping for your board exams or getting ahead on research. There's almost no time where you're ever going to feel great, be able to fully relax like you can on those winter and summer breaks in pre-med, because it's just always going to feel like you're getting behind. And this is a video for another time, but this is all the more reason why it's important to relax. So overall, looking at this category, while I am starting to really enjoy the self-learning environment of medical school, the schedule in pre-med just cannot be beat. And for that reason, the winner of this category is pre-med. So the third category we're going to talk about is social life. And before you discredit medical school, I like to think of it as a work hard, play hard environment. So definitely don't discredit that. But with that out of the way, let's talk about pre-med. So in college, depending on where you go, obviously the sheer number of people is almost ridiculous. There is so much more free time. There's so many people that are your age, so many opportunities to hang out. Social life is definitely not a concern. So for me personally, in my college experience, I want to say that there were like 30,000 people on my campus, which is almost ridiculous. I probably only met 1% 10% of them. But even with that, it was more people than I met in my entire high school cohort. I was probably hanging out with people almost every single day in undergrad. Obviously, even on the days when I was studying, you could still go to the library and find some friends and chill with them. There were always impromptu events going on. I took a lot of trips with friends. And at the end of the day, college has some of the best memories that I'll keep with me for the rest of my life. And my friend group that I currently stay in touch with is mainly from college as well. A side tip here, if you do decide to go to medical school, and this is obviously going to be the case even if you don't go to medical school, but stay in touch with those friends from college. For me, sometimes it can help so much just to disconnect from what I'm doing here and hang out or talk with them or text with them. The funny thing is, a lot of them actually also ended up at medical school, but for the most part, this is just going to be a great time to disconnect from the day-to-day life that can get really stressful here. Now let's talk about the medical school side of social life. So for the most part, this is going to be kind of similar to high school is the way I think of it. Obviously, people are very different ages, but you have a very close-knit cohort. Most of the time, people are obviously going to be working, but you can make an argument that whenever you do finally hang out with the other people in your classes, those experiences are going to be much more meaningful. There's also always the joke about like trauma bonding. So in medical school, you get plenty of pain and you're going to have plenty of opportunity to bond over your shared miserable experiences through a lot of those classes. These people are actively on the roller coaster with you, going through the ups and downs. You'll be able to also talk to some upperclassmen and get some really close mentors, people that you're going to be friends with for a long time. And even though people will probably disperse all over the country from your medical school class for residency, you're still going to be very close to the people that you knew very well in medical school. And another sneaky social component of medical school that people probably overlook is that obviously when you do finally get to your clinical rotations or when you get to the hospital and you're working on a care team, you're going to have social interactions with those people that you work with. You're going to bond with them. You're going to be able to help patients and see their results, especially in longitudinal care settings. And those are probably going to be some of the most meaningful social connections you're going to develop. Most doctors can almost always remember some of the very first patients that they had, especially some of the bigger cases. And you simply can't always get that deep connection before now, especially if you're somebody that gets most of your fulfillment and meaning from helping other people. In medical school is where things might finally start to click. So comparing social life in pre-med to medical school, the true difference to me is in the delta or the change from high school to college and from college to medical school. Sure, medical school has a great social life and is an opportunity to be in a new place and meet new people, but the sheer gap in the level of freedom you get, the number of people you get to meet, the things that you can do, and the exciting events you can go to in undergrad just makes it unbeatable, plain and simple. So for that reason, the winner of category 3 goes to pre-med. So that brings us to category number 4, which is the novelty factor. Now, obviously in pre-med, you have a lot more independence, you have freedom. It's basically just a giant buffet of possibilities. But then you got to learn all the basics of independence again, like living on a new campus, navigating roommates, and then figuring out how to get groceries and make your own meal. Or if you're on the meal plan, navigating which dining halls are good to go to and which aren't, which foods are good to eat and which aren't, figuring out where's the best place to be to study, who to talk to as a mentor, all of that good stuff. As far as novelty goes on your path of life, this is about as broad as it can get. Who are you going to be as a person and what path are you going to go down in your career? For me personally, I lived with 3 other guys on campus my first year and ended up my last year of college living with 4 other guys. I had the meal plan, so that was good. It was covered there. The gym was basically undefeated on campus, and I really had no sleep schedule whatsoever. Some nights I would go to bed at 11 p.m., some nights at 3 a.m. All of those changes combined, plus a million others, led to a ton of novelty, but almost to a flaw. There was almost too much novelty. In medical school, the novelty is surprisingly very similar to undergrad because you end up oftentimes in a new place with an entirely different new cohort of students, and you're trying to figure out what career path you're going to go down, even though you know it will be in a certain field. You learn about yourself in a different way. You're gonna push yourself to the max in what you thought your true capabilities were, and oftentimes learning things you knew you wanted to learn but didn't even know they existed. At the end of the day, medical school has the novelty of figuring out what career path, what exact career path that is, you're gonna take for the rest of your life and spend almost every day doing. For me personally, one of the biggest novel changes in medical school was that it's essentially learning an entire new language. I'm finally able to understand things that I thought sounded like complete gibberish when I was volunteering or shadowing earlier in my life, and I'm surrounded by some of the smartest people that I've ever met. Looking back at both of these categories, I think it's gonna sound crazy, but honestly, I think there's such a thing as too much novelty. In undergrad, I definitely would have disagreed with you here. I probably would have said I wanted to stay in college forever, but I eventually would have resented it. At least where I am right now, I prefer the novelty that comes alongside the predictability and structure that you get through working through a program like medical school. And so for that reason, the winner of category 4 is medical school. Finally, that brings us to category number 5, which is deriving meaning. And honestly, this one is completely neck and neck for me. And at the end of the day, it's pretty subjective. And on a day-to-day basis, I might change what I think. Pre-med and medical school here honestly both have great arguments. So we'll start with pre-med, which is that this is where you actually form your identity and the goals that you're likely going to pursue for the next few decades. The meaning you're going to get here is obviously from those new experiences and ideas that you're going to be exposed to. It's also going to be from the amazing memories that we talked about earlier that are going to be some of the best in your life when you look back on them. And for me personally, I actually got meaning about my entire career. So originally when I applied to undergrad, I didn't apply as pre-med. And after a year or so of exploring different career paths, that's when I decided on it. I knew I wanted to help others, but I wasn't quite sure the exact way I wanted to do that until my first few years of college. So in medical school, again, I alluded to this a little bit before in the social life section, but when you transition to providing care and working alongside a team of providers, the sheer level of impact that you're able to make is huge. The way I like to think of this is that the meaning is no longer just inside of your head or something that you create. You actually embody the meaning and can transfer that to other people in your community. Instead of who you want to be in your head, which is what you figure out in college, the meaning from medical school derives from, can you be that person under pressure? So overall, the meaning that you get from both of these is actually very similar. In college though, the breadth of your meaning is much wider. And then in medical school is when you finally choose where you want to dig in, and the depth of your meaning is going to go much deeper. These are basically equal to me, but right now where I am, the depth of medical school just beats out college. So now with my reflections and experiences from both of those across the 5 categories, the overall winner goes to medical school for me right now, which is hopefully how I know that I'm in the right place. And at the end of the day, I don't think in order to go to medical school that you need to think that it's better than college by any means. This is simply just to break down an informative comparison of both of those for y'all. So go ahead and decide on your own breakdown of those 5 categories. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hopefully you got some value from this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one.